right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. We are talking all about macros and why you're so bad at tracking them. So macro tracking is a very, very simple concept, but us ladies have a tendency to make things so much harder than they need to be. Macro tracking is easy. So we're going to go back to the basics. So let's just review. Macros stand for macronutrients. So macronutrients are your three biggies that you need to hit every single day. Your proteins, your fat, your carbohydrate. So those are your three macronutrients. So when you're tracking macros, it's more than just counting calories. Say, I'm just eating 1,800 calories a day, period, the end. You actually pick certain calories from certain each macronutrient. So you're like, all right, maybe 30% of my calories are coming from protein. Maybe 30% of my calories are coming from, fat. The remaining 40% of my calories are going to come from carbohydrate, for example. So you basically have a chunk of macros and you should hit them each day. So by the end of the day, the whole point is you actually have your macros met. Hey Megan, thanks so much for joining. Hey Anna. So basically, macro tracking is a very, very simple thing. It is like, here's your numbers, meet them. And then us ladies, we overcomplicate everything. You think, okay, I can eat whatever I want, so I'm going to track macros by having something different for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks every day. Try all these new recipes, new this, new that, and before you know it, you're having trouble tracking because you're picking things that require you to devote enough time for it to be a part-time job, for you to even just simply track your macros. So let's keep it simple, especially if you are new to macro tracking. Stop with the recipes, get off Pinterest for the love of God, and just be simple. Literally, for dinner, instead of doing, some really complicated spaghetti squash, zoodle, zucchini, bacon bake with the balsamic glaze drizzle with the crusted almond, whatever. There are so many things that go into a recipe, and if you're tracking macros and you're trying to make it a recipe, you have to log every single thing. Hell no. Of course that's going to take a lot of time. And of course you're going to think, I don't have time to do this shit. Who has time to track macros? Keep it simple. So going back to what we started with, your macros, your three macronutrients, your protein, your fat, and your carb, keep them separate. So a really, let's use chicken or a whitefish. It's a really lean protein. So it's mainly just a protein source. So you have your chicken or, mahi-mahi, scallops, whatever. So you have your protein, mainly just protein because it's not very fatty. So then you're like, okay, protein, check. All right, now I need a carb. All right, I can do some pasta. I can do rice. I can do potato, whatever. You go, bread, God forbid. We forget people can eat bread. So then you have your carbs. So you have your protein, you have your carb. Then you're like, okay, now I need to add a little bit of fat. So maybe I'm going to put butter on the bread, or I'm going to add some butter to the noodles that I made for pasta. Or maybe I'm going to do some sliced avocado because it's going to complement my fish. So then you have your protein source, carb source, and your fat source. And then you're going to have a side salad because you want to throw on a little non-starchy vegetable. Hey, Crystal. So basically, you have each one individual, and you literally had to log a very few things. I log chicken, then you log rice, then you log your avocado, and then you log your salad. Whatever, like lettuce. Ta-da, you're done. Instead of doing a really, really complicated recipe. So by keeping them separate, you can easily change them and easily meet your goals. So let's say, for example, I'm going to be in my phone and I'm logging tomorrow. If I do it right, because I'm new to macro tracking and I want it to be easy and I want it to be simple and I just want to meet my fucking macros because I'm determined, keep it easy. So all right, so we got my dinner planned. We're doing the chicken, the rice, some avocado, and a side salad. Dinner is ready. Remember, I'm planning tomorrow. Always better to plan in advance so you have time to kind of adjust it. So then when you wake up, the numbers already match up because you already did it and you just follow the script. You just don't even have to think about it. So then apply those same concepts to, your breakfast. All right, protein, fat, carb, maybe some veggies. So protein. All right, what am I going to do? I want eggs. Okay, great. So eggs have protein and fat. So you don't need to have an additional fat. So honestly, let's get serious, ladies. If you're scrambling like 4 eggs together and then you're adding cheese and having a slice of avocado toast, all delicious things, all healthy food, but that's a fat bomb, especially if you want any fat later in the day. So it's just about being mindful of where things are being stretched. So keeping it simple, planning a breakfast, like, okay, if I'm going to do some eggs, that's going to be my fat source and my protein. Maybe I'm going to scramble them, so I'll add a few extra little liquid egg whites, little extra protein, never hurt anybody. Then I need carb. All right, I'm going to put it on toast. Yum. Or I'm going to have, a side of oatmeal or a side of cream of wheat, or I'm going to literally throw 2 Eggo waffles in the toaster. Carb. Done. Got your fat in the egg, got your carb, and let's throw some veggie in there. Maybe you're going to mince up some greens or some bell peppers, some mushrooms. I did that this past weekend. Throw them in with the eggs, scramble them, done. Protein, fat, carb, veggie. Lunch, same concept. All right, let's make a sandwich. Bread, carb, protein, lunch meat, fat. There's some cheese in there. Ta-da! Or maybe you don't want cheese. Maybe you want some mayonnaise. Totally fine. Maybe you have, instead of bread, you want to do a lettuce wrap, and then you have a side of crackers, because there's your carb. Ta-da! And then you want some vegetable. So side salad, cut up bell pepper, whatever. So if you look at how I'm workshopping each of those meals, everything is different. Everything is separate as far as like you have your protein source, you have your carb source, you have your fat source typically, and then you have some vegetable. It's really easy to adjust that way. So let's say I'm logging for tomorrow, got my, like scrambled egg white and a couple eggs mixed in there for my breakfast. Apparently I'm just doing this a lot today. And then, lunch, I have my sandwich, have some crackers. And then for dinner, I have my chicken and I have my rice and my avocado and a side salad. And then for dessert, oh baby, it's yogurt bowl time. So I'm gonna have some Greek yogurt. I'm gonna put a little bit of a flavored yogurt in there with it. Gonna top it with some cereal, maybe some granola, some chocolate, some berries, just peanut butter, everything. All those things are still all separate. So then if I look at my daily totals and I'm like, damn, I'm like 20 grams over on fat. How'd that happen? I can easily say, okay, well look, I'm having half an avocado with dinner. I'm gonna have a fourth of an avocado for dinner. You adjust your fat down. Or you know what, I was gonna use a tablespoon of olive oil to cook the chicken in. I'm gonna use half a tablespoon. I really don't need that much. I have nonstick pans, let's get serious. Or you know what, I'm gonna use less mayo on my sandwich, and I realize I have a ton of fat in breakfast because I'm doing a bunch of whole eggs. I'm going to take out 2 whole eggs to save from the egg yolks and add some egg whites. There's nothing wrong with egg yolks or dietary fat. That's not what I'm getting at. But if you have everything separate like that and you're really far over on a macro target, it's really easy to go back and adjust the rest of the day because everything's really individual. Or if I'm looking at my log and I'm like, holy sweet Jesus, I'm 50 grams over on carbs because this girl likes her carbohydrates. And I'm like, oh, whoops. I'm having a ton of rice for dinner, a ton of granola on my yogurt bowl. I chose some really dense bread with lunch and crackers. Like, you can see where things are. I'm like, all right, maybe I just don't need those crackers with lunch. I'm going to replace those with maybe some carrot sticks. Or I'm going to have half a sandwich instead of a whole sandwich with 2 slices of bread. Or I'm going to have less rice with dinner. Or I'm going to swap the rice off of dinner and replace it with cauliflower rice. Or I'm going to take the cereal off of my yogurt bowl and replace it with a couple berries. So if I have all of the things kind of separate, like a carbohydrate, then if I'm really far over, it's easy to take some of it out and the other macros really aren't adjusted. Like, it's not going to be a hit to my protein or my fat if I take out the rice because it's mainly just a carbohydrate. So same thing if you're under on something. Like, wow, I'm 10 grams over, or I'm sorry, let's say I'm 20 grams under on carbohydrate, is I'm going to add extra rice to dinner, or I'm going to add, some chocolate chips to my yogurt bowl. What's up? Like, you can then add whatever you're kind of missing. So if you keep them separate, it's really easy to play. I call it macro Tetris. You kind of just make all the little pieces of the puzzle fit. It's so easy to make the puzzles fit if they're all individual puzzle pieces. Where people start getting into trouble with macro tracking, and this is you guys messing it up. You're making something very simple, very challenging with recipes. Recipes are great, but not if you're new to macro tracking. Recipes and new to macro tracking do not mesh. You got to be good at macro tracking before you can get creative and have a lot of fun. Like, you have to learn how to ride a bike before you can pop a wheelie and hit a ramp. So first, get good at the basics. So if you're let's say for tomorrow, I'm the queen of recipes. I got my French toast, oatmeal, blueberry, gluten-free, whatever breakfast bake because I prepped that on Sunday. So I have my breakfast bake. And then for lunch, I'm going to have soup, and because I also prep that on Sunday in my crock pot, so then I have my breakfast bake, and then I have my soup. And then for dinner, we're probably going to end up doing a lasagna, and yeah, we'll just go from there. So then, as you're going through the day, if you, one, didn't plan ahead, you have no idea how far you're going to be off. And then so after you've had your lasagna, you look at it and you're like, wow, I am like 800 grams over on fat and way over on carbs. I've had almost no protein. So error one was you didn't do it the day before. Because if you do it the day before, you have time to adjust. If you don't realize that you're so far off of your numbers until 8 p.m. the day of, and you're so far over, well, the ship has sailed. So whoopsie, plan better. But the biggest issue is even if I'm planning, so let's say I'm doing it for the next day, and I got my breakfast bake, I got the soup I made, and I'm logging lasagna, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, shit, I am now over on fat by 15 grams, I'm under on protein by 40 grams, and I'm over on carb. So I'm over on fat and carb, I'm under on protein. It's really hard to adjust things that aren't in isolation. So I'm like, well, okay, I can have less breakfast bake because there's a ton of fat in there and a ton of carb and not much protein. But okay, so I'm having a lot less breakfast bake, but then there is some protein in there. So then I replace it with, you start not being able to change things. Like, well, soup, okay, well, there's really a set amount of carb and fat in that soup serving. So either just have less of it, or same thing with like lasagna. Like, well, I can't really change the amount of fat in the serving because I already made the dish, or it's a frozen one. Who cares if it's frozen? So if you have like one food item and all of your macros just live in there, all of them. So let's say it's a piece of lasagna. Maybe it even has like 35 grams of protein, 20 grams of fat, and 50 grams of carbohydrate. You know, well, I'm over on fat and carbs, so I'm going to have less of the slice of lasagna. But then you're already under on protein, and then you take off some lasagna that had protein in it, and now, yes, carb and fat went down, but so did protein. So it's so hard to meet your macros, especially if you're new at this, if you're making recipes, and your whole day is built on recipes, because you don't have any individual variables for tweaking. Whereas if you have individual variables for tweaking, you know, you have your protein, whether you do a meat or meatless option, and you're using things more like, you know, quinoa and edamame and some cheeses, whatever. But keeping some individual variables in your meals help you meet your goals when they're not met. So if you're looking at your day and you're like, wow, I'm really high over on fat, you should be able to go in your log somewhere and find some fat in isolation, whether you're adding peanut butter to something, having some almonds for a snack, cooking with some olive oil, going heavy on the cheese, maybe on one of your salads, adding avocado to something. Maybe you're putting sunflower seeds on your salad, which I've been doing, which has been super good. But find a predominant fat source. Maybe you're adding a ton of butter to your English muffin in the morning, and if you're really over on fat, then you just take away the fat source, or you add less of it, or replace it with something else. If you're like, I'm consistently over on fat and under on carbohydrate, and I have an English muffin with butter every morning, take the butter off, because then there goes some fat that you're trying to get rid of, and replace it with, like a fruit spread or something, or honey, something else that you can, oh boy, all the screens are dying. But then you can replace the fat in isolation. If, again, carbohydrate, if you're having a piece of toast, that's mainly just a carb. Whereas if you're having this big breakfast bake, you have your carb and your fat and your protein in there. So that's when macro tracking really starts to suck, as if you're trying to do just recipes after recipe after recipe, multiple recipes a day. If you have to have your recipes, that's totally fine. Maybe just do one a day. Maybe you do a recipe for dinner all the time, but then breakfast, lunch, and snacks you have on lockdown so you can adjust. Because, sometimes I make a recipe and there's very little protein, but there's a ton of fat and carbs, so I am hitting the protein hard earlier in the day, and I'm really hitting that yogurt bowl hard later at night, just to make sure I do meet my protein goals. Or sometimes I'm making a recipe that's extremely protein forward, really not that high in fat, so I put more fat in my meals throughout the day, because again, I'm planning ahead. So stop making macro tracking that hard. It is not, I promise. If you find it that hard, you are doing something wrong. You're either trying to plan recipes, therefore you can never make anything work, because you can't ever just change your protein. You can't ever just change your fat or just change your carb. If all your recipes are so complicated, they're all going to be together. That's the biggest mistake I see people make when new to macro tracking and instantly think it has to take enough time to, you carve out a part-time job and that's what you do. It should not be that time consuming. Make it easier on yourself in the beginning. I get the whole honoring your hunger cues, honoring your cravings. I'm all about that. Eat what you like. But sometimes you just need to eat fucking lunch when you're at work, so make a sandwich and get on with the day. Not every meal has to be like the most experienced, who cares? Just eat something sometimes, for God's sakes, and just move on. So stop making it difficult. Stop doing really complicated recipes. If you can't get the basics down, then you gotta plan ahead. I usually have my Monday through Thursday planned before I hit the grocery store on Sunday. So when I go to the grocery store, I know exactly what I'm buying. I have everything that I need to meet my numbers because I did that on purpose. It is not an accident that I get to meet my macros at the end of the night. It doesn't just happen. I planned it. I set up my environment and I took the steps necessary to make it happen. I planned ahead and I am not doing complicated recipe after complicated recipe, wondering why it's taking me so long and wondering why my numbers never match up. Stick to the basics and keep it simple. It is extremely simple. Once you have the basics down, then you can make it complicated. So if you guys had any questions, now would be an excellent time to start dropping them in because I am running out of things to say. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you're having trouble with macro tracking. It is a very simple concept. You just have to put in the work to figure it out for a few days. Then it just gets really, really simple. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, make sure you drop them in the comments. I promise I'll answer everything, or shoot me a DM, and I'll see you later. Bye.